past the midway point in the semester. What are we going to talk about now? Well, we've come up to this place of talking about equipping and discipling within the local church for the specific roles we've identified that are needed to do ministry effectively in light of our mission statement, in light of the vision God's given us for that local body of believers. But you know, everybody in our church lives within a community. They have a job in which they make a living to provide for their family. And so what we're going to talk about now is how does our leadership equipping and discipling need to move, not only for just focusing on fulfilling the functions we have as a church in the body to reach and make disciples, but what is the overflow of that? What does that look like to move that not just from our ministry setting, but to community impact? Should our leadership and equipping and discipleship in the local church move to a place to where when someone leaves the ministry setting each week of the church, are they able to be a better lawyer, a better school teacher, a better parent, a better stay-at-home mom, a better preschool educator, a better coach, fill in whatever position exists in your community? Are they more equipped for what God is leading them to do every week to make a living as well? Or are they just feeling equipped to be a good Sunday school teacher? Are they just feeling equipped to be a good volunteer in ministry? But are they also equipped to live out what they do Monday through Friday? Dr. Stewart, why don't you kick us off with what that looks like?
Okay. I think you have to define the terms first, because I know that for me personally, I think that when you look at the term Christian and you look at the term disciple and you look at the term leader, they can be synonymous at some level.
Yes, they can.
That's true.
And so because of that, if you think about, okay, every Christian is actually a disciple of Christ. Every disciple of Christ is actually a leader. Then if you start off that way to begin to think about it that way, then yes, they can go out into the community. So as you develop a disciple-making strategy or a process, I like the way Rick Warren defined it many years ago in his book Purpose Driven Church. He talked about, okay, if you get to third base, first base being joining the church, second base being discovering your skills and abilities, and then joining a small group, and then third base being, okay, ministry. Okay, ministry is defined as using your spiritual gifts and coming to the church.
Yes.
And then home plate would be missions, which would be, okay, now I'm going to reach out into the community.
Yes.
And what that does is if you do process that way, then eventually we are going to impact our neighborhoods. We are going to impact our workplaces. And, you know, that's probably the next place for disciple making and small groups to exist is in workplaces.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably where we're going. So in the culture. So yes, I do think that we can move from Christian to disciple to leader to go into the community.
So maybe the question should be, maybe I should have started with this question. Are we equipping our leaders in the church to go out and be missionaries in their vocations?
Right.
Right.
Are
I
we
think that's
equipping
the
them
question.
Yeah, that
for-
is the question.
For that next stage beyond the church, if you will.
Yes.
To be a missionary in their workplace.
Or in your school.
Well, I think that
Yeah.
I think we are, but I think we need to also consider broadening our language, our vision.
Okay.
That rather than specifically talking to an individual about this leadership training that you're involved in, that we want to prepare you for the class that you'll teach or the small group that you're leading, but broaden that to help them understand that we're talking about something that could benefit you in your whole life. And so it's a more holistic approach to discipling someone and developing them as a leader, to not just be a leader in our church, but a leader in the community.
I think the biblical model is there's certainly certain giftedness and callings that are connected to the function and operation of the church and the meeting of the church. When the assembly happens, there are some things that have to be done by somebody.
Right.
And some of those are paid positions, and some of those are volunteer positions and call positions. But there's also a missional component that, as Dr. Stewart referred to, and I think our society has separated those culturally sociologically the last 30 years. Those things used to be more integrated, and now they're more compartmentalized. And what we're seeing is what I do at church. When I was growing up, my third grade Sunday school teacher was my fourth grade school teacher. Those things are now isolated from one another, and so what we're seeing is a greater need to take the growth that happens at the church and the discipleship and the equipping that happens there into the places where we live, work, and play, which is the new mission field. So how do we reconnect those in a compartmentalized culture and society?
So we're having to be more strategic as our communities are less Christianized.
Correct.
Yes.
Less churched. That we're having to
Absolutely.
be even more strategic, that we're just not equipping for the church's sake, for our individual ministries. While we need to do that, that's a primary role. But we're also having to be sure our people are equipped to be missionaries in the community.
That's right.
Which really we should have always been doing.
Sure. It was
You
just a
know,
little easier back in the day.
Well, in some communities, church was the game in town. I mean, in the community
right.
I
It's the
grew up
center of the
in,
culture.
there was the sidewalk rolled up on Wednesday night. There were no ball games on Wednesday night because that was a church night. And
Was that just true for small towns, southern
well,
part of America?
I don't know,
or-
but it was the only perspective I had.
Right,
you
right,
know?
right.
And so the church was really the center of much of our social life, if you will, our community, or the community respected that the church had a really strong hold there, if you will.
That
But
was
it's
probably
not
true
like
of
that
most
anymore.
evangelical churches, and especially
Yeah.
in the South.
Right.
And the pastor was typically one of the most educated men in the city.
And
so,
well respected.
Yeah, well respected. So it went hand in
Right.
hand.
So, but things are shifting, even in small towns. Things are shifting.
Right.
And so it's not the same.
In
There
different
are-
regions,
absolutely.
it looks different parts of our
Right.
globe.
So, we have to, but the church has always had the charge to send our people out. And maybe for too long we got real comfortable.
And we're fighting a natural tendency to become self-sustaining.
Right.
What are we going to do to preserve ourselves and preserve what we know? And so the push to be missional has always had to be there to be motivational for our congregation.
And the tension's always there to be sure all the ministries are staffed well as the church gathers. And there's also a struggle that each week we can be consumed with our time and being sure that we are focused on our ministries doing well as we gather, that we forget that there's an extension of that. That we forget this part.
So what do you tell a Sunday school teacher who says, or a small group leader that says, "Hey, I'm giving up my position at church so that I can do this during the week in my neighborhood or in my workplace?"
We say,
We should celebrate that.
Yeah, we should celebrate, but we say, "Oh no, I'm losing my teacher."
yeah, I had
Who are you
a,
getting to replace
Yeah.
you? Who have you mentored to come alongside you and fill a void?
I had a young woman who came to talk to me, and she said, that very thing, we're not going to be coming on Sunday nights because they had lost family members, did not know Christ, and these family members had asked this young couple to teach them about the Bible. And so on Sunday nights, she said he was a young deacon. On Sunday nights in our home, we're going to have these family members and some other people coming to our home, and we're going through. I think they were going to use the Gospel Project. He had a plan, and she was with fear and trembling. She came to tell me they were not going to come on Sunday nights. I was like, "Good for you." She was like, "What?" I said, "Oh, look, what better could there be than that? Even your children, your family see." That this is about life. It's not about a building. It's about relationships. It's about our relationship with Christ, with God. And so this is all a good thing. But that means that we have to not be so as concerned about our organization as we are about the kingdom.
That's right. And many of our folks spend more time in their workplace with people. They're spending 40 or 50 hours a week with colleagues, and they get to hear their hurts and their pains and their needs.
Right.
What a better way to present the gospel in those environments and I've had folks who say, "I'll do a lunch Bible study once a week," or something like that, and that begins to engage people with the Word of God, the promises that are His.
I think it's great.
We don't have all the answers for you to figure this out because every context is going to be unique. It's going to be unique based on who's on staff. It's going to be unique based on who's coming to your church. It'll be unique based on what size your church is. And if you're in a small town or an urban environment. But what is important is for you with your mentor in your ministry setting to begin to unpack, are we doing mentoring relationships? How are we doing in generation ministry? How are we doing in equipping our people to serve in the ministries of the church and be more mature in their individual relationship? but also in this conversation. How are we equipping them to be out in the community, equipping them to be in the workplace, equipping them to be in a home? I know every time our family gathers, and as an extended family, how are you a missionary even in your extended family? As you begin to look at all these areas, how are you in your church communicating that? Because, our people celebrate what we celebrate. So if our worship services and our events and all the things that we're doing are not keeping this conversation also before our people, then chances are they're just going to be more inward focused in the church and our ministries and doing those well. And we also, by default, increase this idea of a compartmentalized church, and what we do at church does not really impact where we're at on Monday. And so we just pray that with your mentor, you begin to resolve those and answer those questions and ask those questions so that you can be more effective in discipleship ministry.